Hello and welcome to a new episode of Brands After Hours with Marty, Neumeier, Andy, Starr, and the book The Brand Gap. Welcome to a new and English episode of Brands After Hours. In the past, I have always mentioned Marty Neumeier on this podcast, so I'm even more excited to have him and Andy Starr as guests on my podcast today. So we talk about the books The Brand Gap, which I worked on with Marty, and we talk about brands, branding, startups, and Steve Jobs. So let's get started, and I hope you enjoy. Hello, Marty and Andy. I'm very happy to have you as a guest on my podcast today. And before we start, please introduce yourself so that the listeners who don't know you yet know who you are.
Okay, Andy, you want to lead off?
I
think about it.
I was going to say the same. I'm just going to make something up off the top of my head. No, I am Andy Starr. I am managing partner and co-founder of Level C. I'm trying to be a brand strategist or a brand architect. And as soon as I figure out what either one of those titles actually means, I'm going to claim one or the other.
And I am Marty Neumeier. I'm the author of 8 or 10 books, depending on how you count. And co-founder of Level C, of which I'm very proud to be Andy's partner. And we've had a great run of luck from the moment we started this organization. And, I'm doing my best, and so is Andy, to continue it and build it into something even more meaningful.
Mm-hmm. So I'm curious, how did you meet each other, and what is the story behind it?
I think Andy has the better story, so I'll let him tell it.
Yeah, I think it's more of my story. So the short version of the story is, so many other people, I was a big fan of Marty. I read like you, like so many other folks. Mm-hmm. And I was lucky enough to have someone put a copy of The Brand Gap in my hands when I was a law school student back in, I think it was 2009. So we're approaching, 13, 14, 15 years. And it changed the way I thought about business, the way I thought about products, the way I thought about customers, and kind of gave me that first understanding of what brand really meant. And like so many other people, I became a fanboy. I realized I wanted to get into this kind of work, and I stalked Marty online. It took me a few days to find him at his old agency, Neutron. Figured out his email. I sent him an email out of the blue, and I said, "Read your book, big fan. Would love to learn from you. Be my mentor from a distance." And he wrote back very, very politely but very directly, and he said, "Buzz off." But I kept at him. And after several years of trying to do this work, I found myself at a startup that had this idea that was kind of similar to what Marty and I have done with Level C. And I had a reason to reach out to Marty again and say, "This is the idea. This is what we want to do. You would be the perfect person to kind of prototype this with." Mm-hmm. And I was lucky enough that he responded. He was interested in it. We talked about it. We were going to give it a go. The startup collapsed. But Marty and I kept talking. And one day Marty said to me, "Look, if they couldn't do it, why don't we try to do it?" And there was no way I could say no. No way on earth. So here we are.
Okay. So this is Level C, the startup, or what is it exactly?
No, Level C was not the startup. It was a different startup, but it had an idea that inspired us. It was something that Marty and I both wanted to try to make happen. And we couldn't do it with that startup. But we kept talking about it. And that's when Marty asked if I would be interested in just trying to do it, just the two of us. Mm-hmm. And it was scary. It made way more sense for Marty at the time than it did for me. But it was one of those moments where I just knew if I didn't do it, if I didn't try to do it with him, I would regret it for my life.
As I recall, I didn't sugarcoat it either.
Right.
I think I said, this is basically certain death if you take this on. No money probably for at least a while, if ever. But it could turn out to be something we don't know, because it's a startup and all you can do is take the first steps and see what happens. And we were so surprised by what happened on our very first masterclass in London. People were so excited to be there and got so much out of it, and much more than I'd gotten out of, or my students had gotten out of previous workshops that I've given and previous classes. This somehow, the combination of me and Andy and the way we were going about it, really caught people, and they started to turn into a community immediately. And this was not something we had planned. That had never happened before to me, where students started connecting with each other and wanting to do things together and just keep going and going and going. That just kind of happened out of the blue. What do you think, Andy? What was your take on that?
My take was, what I remember wasn't so much Marty's warning that this was almost certainly a suicide mission, and the odds were probably against us, even though neither one of us really knew why or how, and we wouldn't make money for a while. That wasn't the scary part to me. The scary part was actually the not knowing exactly how to do it, right? And we both had ideas. Those ideas were very similar. They overlapped, and I think that was that was an important key to that early success for us, right? So that when we went to that first masterclass in London, that first session, we had no idea what it was going to be. We made no money from it, but we knew really, like in the first few hours, that it was different. It was something, and we rolled with it. It was the same thing really a year later when the pandemic started and we had to cancel planned masterclasses in different cities, and we didn't know what was going to happen. And then everyone started doing everything online, and we were getting lots of pressure to do that. We didn't, and we delayed it because we didn't know how to do it. We didn't know how to translate level C at that time into an online experience. And that was, I would argue that was even scarier, because we were seeing success. We were generating momentum, and all of a sudden it was like, we don't think we're going to survive as a business. But we knew within the first couple of hours of the first online session that we did, no, this is going to work. We're going to be okay. This will be valuable for people. So the learning for me, the most valuable part of this experience with Marty has been learning how to embrace the uncertainty. Especially when you just don't know, right? And there are a lot of professional education programs, masterclasses, workshops, webinars, content decks. in different topics and different categories that are out there. And so many of them are framed as how to do this, how to do that. Here's the formula, here's the recipe. Nothing like that would have helped us. Mm-hmm. We had to embrace the uncertainty of it and work through it, knowing that it would take time, knowing that it would be painful in certain ways, knowing that we would hit walls, not knowing where we would land, how Marty and I would get along as partners, as collaborators, as the right brain, the left brain, the creative, the strategist, right? We had no idea. Mm-hmm. But
one thing I think is that we had a secret weapon. We have a set of brand principles that we were teaching that we applied to our own business. And that's the first thing we did, is apply these generalized principles to who we are, what we're doing, why it matters, using everything we teach. And none of that was violated by the sort of the accident of COVID. It just meant that one of our features had to go. And that feature was that we were only going to do live classes, nothing online. So, but that wasn't a core feature of the brand. So we just had to toss that out and just say, hey, look, this is life. Now, how do we do this? And Andy was great figuring it out. And we had help from my colleagues at Liquid Agency, who had been doing some Zoom workshops and figured out a lot of it and shared that with us. But a lot of it was just Andy just, plugging away, figuring it out. And it turned out that going online was probably a leap for us. I mean, it was a leap in our success rate, really. I don't think we could have done as much so quickly without going virtual.
Mm-hmm. And there's just one more thing I would say, Marcel. A lot of people, one of the questions I get asked by everyone is, what is it like working with someone like Marty? How was I able to earn his trust and his faith and his confidence? And I would say personally, for me, just for Andy, it's that was probably the most challenging part from the very beginning, because I'm still, the sorcerer's apprentice, right? And the apprentice always wants the validation, right? And the recognition by the sorcerer. And I was anxious about that. That was really hard for me to look at and then to try to earn over time. But I would say it's one of the things I'm proudest about in the last few years. It wasn't easy. I am extremely stubborn. I am probably more stubborn even than Marty is. But that stubbornness, the reasons why neither one of us will flex or compromise on certain things in certain ways, we complement each other that way. And it's another kind of key to our success. But if I hadn't been willing to do that, if I hadn't been willing to acknowledge, I don't know this stuff, but here I am with the guy who does know this stuff. And it was almost like I had an obligation to learn from him, not just perform and contribute with him. Mm-hmm. And that was really the hardest part. But here I am. I'm like the luckiest guy in business to be able to
No. I'm the luckiest guy. I have to contradict you.
Now we're going to make everyone feel uncomfortable for a few minutes while we gush over each other.
I've wanted a partner in business since I was 20, and I never found anybody that I thought would work as hard as I would align with what I want to do, and wouldn't just split off and do something else in 2 years. go off to greener pastures. And it's just never happened for me. And I saw it happen in other places. But I think it is the kind of thing that just happens. You have to be open to it, but I don't think you can force it to happen. You can't just go out and recruit a partner. And Andy turned out to be, like you said, a really good compliment to me. We do different things, but we have a similar commitment to quality. And we're idealistic in a way. So I think, it was just lucky. And I don't know, it just felt right to me, even though there were, like Andy said, so many unknowns. I mean, you just have to take it one step at a time and don't dream too big. I mean, yeah, you could dream big, but take small steps. I think our dream was huge, but I think we just said, we don't know what's going to happen. Let's just start really small and see what the next step will be. And that's how we've been doing it. But it's all against the backdrop of having a much bigger idea of where this could go. And I think just as a hint to where this could go, our partnership has a clue in it to where we think it should go, which is we think that the heads of the leadership of a corporation or a large business should probably be 2 people instead of 1. We always think of having 1 leader. But I think in the future, 1 leader isn't going to be enough. You're going to have at least 2 leaders, probably 2, 1 to manage the business and 1 to manage the customers. So the one that manages the customers is the brand person. And we're calling that person the CBO, Chief Brand Officer. And we think that in the future, the CEO who runs the business side and the CBO are going to work as equal partners. We think it has to be that way, even though there's no sign of it really happening out there. We just can't figure out how it could be any other way, given the trajectory of business and how businesses are evolving.
So, Andy, I completely understand you. It's an incredibly interesting story. And but Marty, so last year, you and I worked together with the publisher on the German edition of your book, The Brand Gap.
Yes.
And the book was published in 2003, I guess, and it was read by many people. So I'm curious again, and I would like to know, when did you get the idea to write the book and why?
Why? Well, in a practical sense, it was desperation because I had just lost 2 businesses. I'd never lost a business. I've been in business since I was in my 20s. And I had 2 businesses going. I had a design firm, which was highly successful, and a design magazine, a magazine about design thinking that was not successful, but showed a lot of promise. And I was trying to create sort of a 2-stage rocket where I was going to use the revenues from my design business to get the magazine business off the ground, because I really wanted to teach all the things I'd been learning for the last 40 years. And a bunch of things happened, 9/11, stock market crash, a bunch of other things, including some mistakes on my side that just killed both businesses. And I had to do something. And I thought, well, I could just scramble and try to get a job and make some money and pay back the debts that I owe. Or I could take it further and I could take everything I've learned and have a second shot at it. And instead of teaching creative people, I'll start teaching business people who don't know anything about the value of design. And that's what I did. And that's turned out to be the right thing to do. And so I was lucky on my second try to start addressing the audience that could actually support something like that. And the book was the kind of my business card for what I wanted to do, which was to sort of be the first company to address internal branding, helping businesses get their arms around branding, understand it, create a brand team internally. And they didn't have any way of understanding it or doing that. So the book was the first step. Mm-hmm. And that's really how, it was desperation. And I wrote the book in a circumstance that was less than ideal. I was totally in debt. I had no employees. I had to do everything by myself, pay for it myself with money I didn't have. And it turned out that the book was a bestseller. Mm-hmm. So it hit the charts pretty solidly and then went up, and it got to number 15 of all books in about 2 months, and kind of stayed there for a while. And so that's why The Brand Gap is still the one people read, is because it got this head start. It had a really strong beginning. And even though I've written, half a dozen books since then, people keep going back to the first one. And the first one does have all the basics of everything that I believe about branding. And all the other books have been sort of working on parts of that first book and expanding those to help people understand this sort of complex playing field that we all have to work on when we're in business. So that's how it happened. And it was a success from really day one. The new business was a success, Neutron, as Andy said. And I did that for about 8 years. And then I sold that company to Liquid Agency to give myself more time to write. And that's what I've been doing, and writing and teaching.
Interesting. So you define a brand in your book with a gut feeling. And I already know the answer, but maybe you and Andy can describe for the listeners what exactly a brand and branding is in your words.
Andy knows this by heart, so I'll take a break here, rest my mouth.
Does he? No, it's such an important question and it's one of the questions we are asked the most. What's the difference between brand and branding? What's the difference between branding and marketing? And so on and so on. So Marty defined a brand as that gut feeling, the perception that a customer has of a company's product or service. And we get, and he's been asked even more than I've been, why? How did he get there? How did he land on that definition? It's because we're human beings, because human beings are rational. Human beings make decisions constantly, every day, about different things. They make it with rationale, but they also make their decisions with their gut. Sometimes they make a gut decision irrationally. Mm-hmm. Okay. But like Marty said before, brand is all about the customer. That's what so many businesses get wrong. What businesses also get wrong is what branding means. So if brand is the customer's gut feeling, the perception of what the company is doing, branding is actually what the company can do to influence and to shape that perception. And that creates a balance that I think everyone would prefer, everyone wants to go for. And, I've said this to people. Look at Level C, for example. When people ask me to tell them about the Level C brand, I always say the exact same thing. Don't ask me, ask our students, because the brand belongs to them. They own the brand. Their perception is the brand. But if you want to talk about the business, I'm happy to talk about the business. I'm happy to talk about our product. I'm happy to talk about our architecture. I'm happy to talk about our model. If you want to talk about finances, I'll talk to you about finances. I can talk about the business because I own the business, but they own the brand. That's the difference. Okay. Marty and I both do what we can to shape that perception. We do it with the way we design our master classes, the way we interact with our students, all that stuff. That's our effort to influence that perception. Why? Because it's in our interest to make that happen too, right? And then there's the whole branding versus marketing, or branding or marketing.
Mm-hmm.
We don't think it's branding or branding versus marketing. It's branding and marketing. That's a whole other podcast episode.
I guess yes. I saw so many posts on LinkedIn about this. What's the difference between branding and marketing? And
it's so stupid.
Crazy. Yes.
I get it.
I think this is turfism. This is people trying to protect their turfs. So if marketing is a more established discipline, and in the past, branding it was so small. The idea was so little and compact that it could just fit on the corner of a marketer's desk. It's something you do. It has to do with logos and design and communication and messaging and that sort of thing. And so marketers thought of that as part of what they did, and maybe not the biggest part. But brand has become a much more powerful tool. And I think some marketing people are threatened by that. It's too bad, because it's a great opportunity for marketing people to get up into a more strategic level with their work, because marketing has been shoved down into a more tactical level. And marketers don't like to admit that, but that's what they're worried about. I mean, that's where this comes from, is that, hey, what's this stuff about branding? I know branding. And I also see the same thing in the design world. Design people are saying, I don't need to know anything about branding. I've been doing branding my whole life. Well, yeah, but there's like a whole set of principles that will really help you do this with a lot more sort of focus, and be able to explain it better and be able to connect it with the goals of business. So it's really changed a lot, and there should be no competition between marketing and branding. That's silly. It's like they totally fit together perfectly. In fact, I would say the best brand people have been coming from the marketing side of it. And a lot of them have been coming from design too, where designers suddenly see, wow, if I just expand my knowledge a little bit about my work, and how it fits into a business, I can have a lot more autonomy. I can get more respect. I can have a seat at the table. All this stuff is happening. And so this is really what's been going on in business for a long time now, is we're realizing that every part of business matters and everything has to be coordinated together. And one way to think about that is from the customer's standpoint. If you want to be in business, then you want customers. And if you don't think about customers first, I don't know what you're doing. How do you create a business without putting customers first? It'd be an accident, really, if you created a successful business without first considering what customers want and need, and especially ask the question, what do I want my customers to become? Yeah. It's very important to have that top of mind, not like, how can we make money out of our products? That has to be secondary, because if you don't have customers, you're not going to make any money. You have to start with customer needs, actual customer needs. So that's the role of branding. And that's why we think it's only going to grow in importance inside business. And, the other thing that we've been sort of thinking that helps us know what we're doing at Level C, we have to have an image, a vision of where we fit in the world, Level C. And I'm not claiming, a huge contribution to society here, but we do need some way of thinking about it. And since we have a German audience, I'll share this with them, which is that we're kind of thinking of our business as a Bauhaus for brand. And that's something a lot of designers have familiarity with, and historians too. The Bauhaus was dedicated to changing the way art and commerce work together, because they didn't work together at all. And we're doing something similar with Level C. And when we think about it that way, a lot of our decisions are clarified for us. We start to see, like, what roles do our students play in this? It's not just about the two of us. We're just servants here, right? It's really about a community. It's about a kind of a movement towards a more responsible kind of business, where business is responsible to customers and vice versa, where you have a commitment between customers and businesses.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how we think about it now.
Yeah, I agree. And for example, in my workshops and speeches, I always mention you and show you definition of a brand, because I do this because I think it's easier to understand for startups what a brand really is. And every time startups say to me that from their point of view, brand has been a part of marketing. So, and then they are excited and they are motivated to work on their brand. It's interesting. So, and I think it's a part of how you can communicate what a brand exactly is. I think it's really important. So, and
well, it's important because it's been misunderstood for so long, or the opportunity wasn't really glimpsed by anybody for so long. What branding can do. So, it's important to redefine it. And the other thing is, when you redefine it as a customer's gut feeling about a product, service, or company, is it really changes everything you do in branding. Everything has to change.
Yes.
It opens up all kinds of territory for success that wasn't open before. And so I kind of wince when I hear people talking about companies as brands, this brand or that brand, when they're really talking about businesses or products or companies. Mm-hmm. I just think, I know it's just it's a detail. I'm being finicky, but if you don't understand that a brand isn't something you control all by yourself, then you're not getting it, right? Mm-hmm. You really have to understand that a brand is owned by customers, is created by customers, and you are simply the steward of it. You can affect some change in it, but you really run a company or a business. Mm-hmm. You don't control the brand, but you can influence it if you know how to do it.
Mm-hmm. So, okay, for one, you explain what a brand is in your book, but what else is it about? So there are 5 disciplines, right? And can you describe them in more detail?
I'll take a break and let Andy see if he can remember the 5. I sometimes have trouble myself. 5 is a lot to remember at my age. But we'll get it. We'll get through it together.
Like Marty said before, it really depends on how you count. But if I do this right, so the 5, I think what you're talking about are the 5 core disciplines that we teach in our kind of ground level masterclass. It's what we call masterclass level 1. So the 5 core disciplines are, first, differentiation, and I'll unpack these for your audience. So differentiation is the first one. That's a buzzword. A lot of people use it as a buzzword, but it's not a buzzword. It is, for us, it's like a tenet of the Bible. Okay, mm-hmm. So differentiation is the first discipline. Collaboration is the second discipline. That's probably the one everyone rolls their eyes at the most. Collaboration. I know how to work with people. I know how to manage people. I know how to brainstorm and jam and, all that stuff. But it is a core discipline, and we explain why it's a core discipline. We explain how so many people get it wrong, but then we actually walk through and challenge folks to understand techniques and frameworks that they can use to be better collaborators. Mm-hmm. The third discipline is innovation. This is probably the chunkiest one to unpack, because we talk about things like design thinking, and we explain what design thinking really is, and how the actual definition of design thinking stands apart from so many of the other misunderstanding, bastardized definitions that are out there. We talk about the role of design in business, in the branding process. Design not for the sake of making art and pretty pictures, but using design as a way to solve problems. Okay. Mm-hmm. The fourth discipline is validation. And that's where we start to talk about the critical importance of prototyping, right? So taking ideas, taking strategies, taking solutions, but making them real. Because an idea or a strategy without activation is just hallucination. Our man, Thomas Edison, said that. Okay. So we talk about not just prototyping, but then also testing, validating ideas, how to make ideas stronger, how to prove them, how to sell them. Okay. And then how to use the feedback from that process to make things better, to make an idea better, to make a product, a solution, a process, a service better. Mm-hmm. And then the final discipline is cultivation. And that's where we talk about that important role, the thing that's getting a lot of attention recently, the role of culture, how to build a culture, how to think about what culture is, how it's built, how it's managed, right? How it's leveraged and merchandised. And that's where we talk about things like mission, vision, purpose, values. Okay. So those are the 5 core disciplines that we set up. And we start with them in level 1, because if you can't have that foundation, right? If you can't really command the principles, and each of those disciplines has multiple principles, and then frameworks, and then techniques and methods and processes, then if you can't master those, then talking just about strategy, right? Or architecture or archetypes or, specific aspects of design, it's just talk. It's just noise. Mm-hmm. Okay. So those are the 5 core disciplines. That's how we approach this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Again, so I'm very happy that the book is now available in the German language. And I hope that together we can publish more of your books, Marty, in the German language in the future. And Andy, what about you? Are you planning your own book?
So
why not?
To be honest, I've wrestled with this. Part of me would love to do that. Mm-hmm. Marty has been a wonderful advocate for me. He's been an unapologetic kind of coach, trying to push me to do that. But at the same time, the reason I haven't done that yet is because I don't know that a book is the best medium for me, for us, and even for the landscape. Okay. And I have different ideas about what a better, more valuable, right medium would be. But what's interesting is, Marty mentioned this earlier. One of the ways we think about this institution, right? And that is how we think about level C. We think of it institutionally. Marty referenced the Bauhaus. I love it. I love that idea. And I am extremely committed to creating that kind of architecture for what we're doing. I don't want it to be about Andy Starr putting Andy Starr's content or thought leadership out. I want it to be about level C putting thought leadership out in the market. I want level C to be the pioneer. Okay. Mm-hmm. I don't want it to be about me. And, when Marty and I were planning this, I shared with him my vision for what that looks like. And it's a vision of a collective, a team of people. And a lot of those folks that we do. Mm-hmm. And the really cool thing is I've already begun some of those collaborations with some of them, and they've been fantastic. And we are talking about the first half of next year, really starting like now. We're kind of starting the pre-planning for it. I don't think it's going to be a book next year, mm-hmm. but we have an idea. We have a vision for thought leadership, for very original content, if you will, that is not out there, that can frame the principles that Marty wrote about in The Brand Gap and his other books, principles that he and I have kind of discovered together since we started Level C, principles and frameworks that I've kind of pulled out on my own at the same time. So the short answer to your question is I don't plan a book anytime soon. Everyone else is writing a book, or kind of doing the same kinds of content. We have a very different idea. It's a scary idea. It's a provocative idea. But I told Marty recently, I'm prepared to go all in on it. And so are some of these other senior level C folks that have kind of risen to the top of what we're doing, to the top of this growing audience. So get yourselves ready because something cool is coming. It's going to take a little time.
I'm so excited.
But it's so am I, so is Marty. So yeah.
Yeah, Andy brings up an interesting point. It's so easy to publish a book today. Really? People are doing it all over the place, and they shouldn't be. I mean, I think, what I loved about publishing a book back in, 2003, the first book, is that it was hard. I mean, you had to find someone who believed in your work just to get published, and your book would be worth nothing if it weren't, completely unique, right? There's so many books. There were so many books already that were not unique. They were just somebody's take on something else that somebody else had written. There were very few original books even then. And now that the percentage of original books has gone way down, everything's pretty derivative. And all those books fight for attention on Amazon. I mean, the number of books published is, tripled since I started doing this. And so it's very difficult to get anybody to pay attention to your book. But I would say books are still great if you can write a good book, but you better write a good book. You have to know what you're doing. And it took me, probably 40 years of working up to writing my first book, of learning how to write and learning what's important and reading all the books that are out there and making sure that I had something new to contribute. Otherwise, it's just, I don't know why people do it. They don't spend enough time, but they spend so much time that they're wasting a lot of the time they could be doing something else. So it's kind of like, unless you are really committed to writing something unique and building your business around it, don't do it. And so I think what Andy and I are looking at is what's easy to do, but what's hard to do. Let's find out what's really hard that very few people could pull off. And let's try that. And even if we fail, we'll be taking a step towards doing something fresh and new. So I still think books are amazing tools. I don't think books are ever going to go away. I think smart people read books and get a lot from them. Successful people read books. Like there's a saying in the US, leaders are readers. And I think that's still true. But there's just the problem is getting anybody's attention with a book these days. It's just too many of them. So
here's the other thing about books that I would say is one of the reasons I would argue Marty's books are so popular, and especially are so valuable, is because Marty didn't write the books for him. Marty's books are not about Marty. Marty's books are about all of us. They are for all of us. He wrote them for us. And one of the things when Marty says it's so easy to write and to publish a book these days, so many of those books, they may be well-intended. The people who write them have good intentions behind them. But I would argue most of them are very clearly written, not for us, but for the author themselves. And that's okay, I guess, to a point. I can't do that for myself. I certainly can't do it for our business, okay? And I've made it very clear to Marty, anything that comes out of level C should be about the customer. And the great thing about our students, and the great thing about Marty is I didn't have to sell him on that. He was already there. So anything that we put out, anything that I put out, only goes out if we have that confidence that we're put out for you, not for ourselves. Mm-hmm. Okay. So whether it's a book, whether it's a post on some social media channel, whether it's a different medium of content, that's the only reason it's going to go out at this point. And one of the other questions we get all the time is, Andy, Marty, you can't build a brand these days without posting content as often as you can. There are other influencers out there who literally say, if you don't post content, if you don't make noise, if no one hears you, you don't exist. Mm-hmm. With all due respect, I'm going to use a word. I will call bullshit on that every day of the week. When we put something out, we only do it if it's valuable to you guys. If it's not valuable, it's just noise, and it really doesn't contribute anything. So
the volume of communication that you put out, I mean, that's the thing about social media. It allows everybody to publish and everybody to talk. The question is, who's listening? Usually nobody. So, it shouldn't be about quantity, because, you have to ask yourself, at what point does quantity turn into quality? And it never does. You can put out as much as you want. It's never going to add up to quality. It's only going to be quantity. And I keep thinking about something David Ogilvy said, a famous advertising guy from the 60s, said he only gives 2 speeches a year, no more. And he makes sure that those speeches are groundbreaking, earth-shaking speeches, and that's it. And I thought, and here he's created Ogilvy, Ogilvy Mather, so forth, created one of the huge advertising companies in the world by focusing on quality and not quantity. And so I think we all need to remember that just because things are easy to publish and it's easy to broadcast doesn't mean that it's going to do that much good for you. And especially if you're a follower and not a leader, if you're the first one to do it, it could be interesting. People just think, wow, that guy is really or that woman is really putting out a lot of stuff. But after after you see floods of it coming through all the time, like all these carousels that you see on LinkedIn and Twitter and other places, you just like, what? Everyone has to do the same thing. It's just not interesting.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you. Yeah, it's very interesting. But another question. So this is a podcast for startups, a branding podcast for startups. And so many startups have a great business idea, but often do branding later. So here in Germany. I think branding is an important step at the beginning, but what advice would you give to startups?
Andy?
Also a completely separate podcast episode. Here's
we can do this.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that.
Short version.
The short version is this: a startup has different kinds of pressures than a more established track record boasting company. I would say that discipline of validation, of prototyping and testing ideas becomes super, super critical, but then so does differentiation. And the important thing about that is that concept of differentiation, whether it's for a startup or a more established heritaged company. Every startup will think that their idea, right? The idea of a product, or service, the idea of their strategy for growth to grow beyond just being a startup. Every startup will think that their idea is king, that their idea is bulletproof, won't fail. They will think that the idea behind the startup should easily earn an X million dollar valuation after 6 months, 9 months, 15 months, whatever. And most of the time, it's just not the case. So I would say to a startup, be honest, is your idea different? Is it not, doesn't necessarily have to be disruptive, but we talk about disruptive thinking, disruption as really the ultimate form of differentiation, being different. Can you claim to be the only blank in your market that does blank, right? If you challenge a startup, most of the time they can't get themselves there, okay? And then they say, well, we've already started up, so there's no going back. I think there are these very fundamental realities that startups need to be willing and able to accept. So we can talk about branding, you can talk about strategy, you can talk about design, and they all really do matter. But for startups especially, I think reality is more often than not overlooked, okay? But the great thing about brand is that brand is arguably the best reality check that a startup can bring into their business, right? Because the reality isn't about the startup. It's not about the startup or the idea or the product. It's like Marty said, it's about the customers. So you can think your idea is the best, most valuable idea, life-changing, world-changing that's ever come along. But if you don't have customers, or if your target customers don't think that, that's reality. Mm-hmm. Okay. So my advice to startups is bring brand into it, but understand how to do it. Okay.
Yeah, bring it right. It has to be a day one discipline. Stop thinking about designing products and start thinking about designing customers. The customer is the product.
The customers will tell you arguably what it should be, right? And I know a lot of startups, when you have that conversation with them, startups will say, well, Henry Ford said, if we asked people what they want, they would have said faster horses. That's not the same thing. Yeah. Okay. It's not the same thing. So Marty's absolutely right. And I'm glad he said that. There's this idea of designing customers, not just customer personas. It's not just about profiling your customers. It's really about designing a space for your customers to come into. But the only reason they're going to come into it is if they perceive that there's value, if there's something in it for them. And that's what Marty really talked about when he talked about that focus test. Like, who are you? What do you do? Why does it matter? Not why it matters to the startup or the founders. It's why does it matter to the customer? Okay. That's what matters.
Yeah. You have to think, if Henry Ford had said, instead of just telling people he had a car, what would you want in a car or something? If he said, okay, here's a horse and carriage over here, and here is this thing I'm calling a car. And why don't you just try them both out? And then I'll tell you why the car could be better for you. It saves, it doesn't break down. You don't have to feed it as much, all these things. Give them a choice, give them a prototype. And, if you just tell people that you have this new idea, they'll probably reject it because it doesn't align with what they already know. You have to prototype things, and you have to do that from the beginning. And you have to let customers be part of that process if you're a startup, because you're going to need a core group of customers that really believe in you and that tell everybody else about how great the company is. So if you start with that, you're going to be better off than just thinking that you probably know what to do, and you just need to do it completely divorced from customers and then just spring it on them later. I think that's where a lot of mistakes get made, and the customers reject what you've done because it wasn't, you didn't find out what their real needs were.
So Marcel, I would say, you probably saw this. I know a lot of people have seen it. We've been flooded with questions, interests, all this stuff about the upcoming masterclass that we're doing with the canned water company Liquid Death. So Liquid Death, some of your German audience and your European audience may not be as familiar with them because you can't buy Liquid Death in Europe yet. Although ironically, it's produced in Europe. But Liquid Death is arguably right now the world's most disruptive brand. They took a commodity, arguably the first commodity, the most important commodity, water. And in a few short years, they have built a $700 million company, but they could only do that by curating this just original disruptive brand. But they did it exactly the way Marty was just describing. Okay. They didn't just create the product, put it into market, and try to use marketing, advertising, and selling to grow. That's not what they did. They did the exact opposite. Okay. They curated the brand before there was a product. There was an idea of a product. And Liquid Death's CEO created that customer base by mocking up an image of what the product could be. Okay. That was his prototype. That was his test. The customers showed up.
So interesting.
And then the product was put into market. Okay. So it wasn't like counting cards in a casino. It was like almost more guaranteed than that. He created the demand. He created that. Really, he helped create that brand from the very beginning. Okay. And that's the thing is everyone's talking about a brand like Liquid Death right now and trying to figure out what's the secret sauce. What's the secret recipe? What was the formula?
Yeah.
The genius is there is no secret sauce. There is no secret recipe or cookbook. They actually did exactly what Marty and I teach, right? They followed the exact same principles. Okay. So if you don't want to take it from us, fine. Take it from that case study. It's that's exactly what happened.
It is also what I try to teach. So my clients and startups, and I think it's a correct way. And but before we come to the end, one last question. In the German edition of the book, The Brand Gap, there's a photo where you can see the copy of the book that belonged to Steve Jobs. So on the cover, you can see Steve Jobs hands off. I love this photo. So you knew Steve personally, didn't you, Marty? And so what is the story behind it?
I knew Steve personally, but I don't think he knew that he knew me.
Okay.
I think Steve was, when I first met Steve, he was 28, 29 years old. Was just about to get kicked out of Apple.
Yeah.
We had a meeting when I was interviewing him for a magazine that did not go well. My fault, but I had no idea who I was talking to, what kind of person I was about to meet. He was very difficult and would just disagree with anything anybody said. He was very argumentative. And so I met him then. it was a bad moment for me because I thought maybe that we would start working together. I thought I could really help Apple. I had the right skills at the time. And then I realized that wasn't going to happen, partly due to the argument that I got in with him. But at the same time, I knew that I couldn't work with him if that's how dismissive he was going to be of other people's knowledge and skills. Of course, he grew up a lot after that, but it took 15 years in the desert before he sort of grew up. But he did do a great job with Apple in the beginning and at the end also. So it was great. But we never got to work together in the same room on any projects. But I worked on projects for Apple when he wasn't there, and that was much easier. And my claim to fame with Apple is that I created the white look that you see on all their packages. So everything's white now, right? But it wasn't until I started designing things that way for Apple that it caught on. So that was really the only contribution I made to Apple. But Steve Jobs always said that he didn't believe in research, which is not true. And he definitely did not like me. So I was very surprised to find out that he was using my book. But I don't think he connected it. I don't think he remembered that, that's the guy that I had the argument about logos with way back in 1984. So 1985, I think. Anyway, our paths crossed many times, and once I almost ran over him because I lived in the same neighborhood. So it was just interesting, kind of being in his life on the periphery, but then finding out that he had used my book like a Bible. Apparently, I mean, it looks like it. Mm-hmm. That's what that book is about.
That's how I like to think of it. I will always give Marty more credit than he would give himself. But, I would just say, Marcel, Apple has always had just the most unique attention and care for customers. And, Steve always had that. But, if it was reinforced, I wouldn't be surprised if even for someone like Steve Jobs, it was reinforced along the way through, collaborations with strategists and designers, but also in reading a book like The Brand Gap. It wouldn't surprise me at all.
Yeah. Steve made it a point to associate with really bright people. He worked with possibly the best designer of the previous generation, Paul Rand. I don't know how he knew that was the right guy, but he knew enough to figure that out. He worked with Chiat Day, the advertising agency that did the first Apple stuff, and then brought them back in later when he came back. And they are geniuses, a whole company of geniuses. So Johnny Ives was, is a brilliant product designer, and he was able to recognize that. Probably took him a while. Steve wasn't really fast with design. He didn't really recognize great design right in the beginning when he saw it, but he would come around to it. He had to process it and think it through, but he usually always ended up on the right thing. And I think Apple really probably misses him a lot, his judgment about product design, because I see it slipping a little bit. I see them doing things that I don't think he would have done. I think he's just much more careful about what Apple put out. But, Apple's still going strong. His legacy is very strong within Apple.
What can I say? Thank you. It was an honor to talk to you, and I hope we can do it again someday with another topic, like the difference between branding and marketing or something like that.
No. I'll have different liquid in my cup for that.
No, I guess we have so many other topics, but we should do this. And it was an honor. It had a lot of fun. It was very interesting for me. And again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marcel.
That was the episode with Marty and Andy, and I hope that you are once again aware of how important branding is today. Please subscribe to this podcast because more English episodes about startups and branding will follow.